Beyond the Pelvis is hosted by Dr. Keneal Siegel, a pelvic floor PT and intuitive healer, and Laura Haraka, a somatic practitioner and breathwork facilitator. Each week, we explore alternative and holistic approaches to healing chronic pelvic pain and other painful or chronic conditions. Join us and other experts in mind, body, and spiritual healing as we discuss a wealth of modalities ranging from ancient practices to modern therapies that challenge the conventional Western model of treatment. Let's get right to it.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pelvis, and I am pleased to introduce to you Andrew today. Andrew is an environmental and civil engineer who has recovered from 1.5 years of pelvic pain and symptoms, and we're excited to have him here to share his story with us and his healing journey. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit more about who you are today and how you ended up right here, right now? What brought you here?
Yeah, well, it's a short bio. I have a lovely wife. I have 2 teenage boys, one graduating high school in a month here and off to college this fall, another one right behind him. I'm an engineer. I do environmental and civil engineering work, contaminated site remediation and pipeline design and a few other cool things. I'm a massive cyclist. That's my hobby. I coached soccer for 12 years. So, I turned 50 last year. I'm in denial that I'll be 51 in about a month. All that's kind of, that's the short of it. Overall, I live a pretty normal suburban dad life in a lot of ways, yard work and work Monday through Friday and all the kind of normal stuff. But about 2 months ago, I decided I wanted to start getting my story out there about how I recovered from pelvic pain, because when I was in the worst of it, I really needed more inspiration and to have, so I just kind of been doing this. I got to do another podcast with Eddie, and that was great. And just trying to get my story out there.
Yeah, thank you for being out there and sharing your experience. And we've talked about it on this podcast before. Laura has brought it up specifically about how it was challenging for her going through her history and experience with chronic pain, how difficult it was to find examples of that, and how rewarding it is, and how you feel like you can be in community with other people who are experiencing this, because it can feel really isolating. And just knowing that other people are out there is motivating to get through it, basically. So again, thank you for doing that and being here with us. And that's really why we wanted you on, was to share your experience. So it's another example of an example. So people can feel like they have something and someone else who they can relate to and possibly reach out, because, people do look for people who are similar, who have similar experiences, because it makes you feel not so isolated.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's not a ton of men speaking out about dealing with it. There are separate issues for men and women, but selfishly, I'll say that for men, it's not a lot of men speaking out. It's a real taboo thing. It kind of there's a whole realm there that just makes you uncomfortable to even talk about it.
Yeah. And since you brought that up, now I have a question, because I've been approached online by other men who have pelvic pain, asking if I can help them, if I can treat them, because it's nowhere explicitly on my website that I work with men, but I do under certain circumstances. But they will almost always ask me, do you have any reviews or references from men you've worked with? And my response is, well, if I worked with you and you got better, would you be willing to leave a review? And they immediately go, no, I would not. They don't feel comfortable. Why?
Yeah.
I know, clearly you are not that person, but from a male perspective, why is it so taboo? Why is there so much shame around experiencing pelvic pain? Whereas women are generally more open about it and willing to share and leave reviews and share their experiences publicly with other people, with friends, with family, whereas men are a little bit more private.
Yeah. We jumped right into the touchy-feely stuff quick. This is good.
Mm.
I guess no surprise, right? I think, there's a lot around, inadequacy as a man for the, sexual dysfunction. So that's going to be very sensitive. And even if you recovered from it, to admit that you had that issue would be tough for some. If I put myself back in my shoes of where I was in the beginning of it, I could understand that. I mean, I was pretty comfortable with the pelvic PT work that I had, but it is, it's invasive. It's not women go to OBGYNs, through their life, and you get a little bit more used to that invasive touch. For a man, that's, I mean, there's men that put off a stinking colonoscopy or prostate exam forever just because they're so uncomfortable with somebody doing that. So you put that around sexual inadequacy and pain and urination dysfunction, all that stuff around it. I think there's going to be plenty of men that just are not comfortable with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know that was a big question, and I didn't expect you to answer for like all men in, the area, but I just wanted to hear one perspective and highlight that your perspective is just your perspective, right?
Yeah,
But thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
And it takes a lot of courage to share your story as a man or a woman, to talk about parts of our body that are more vulnerable to speak about.
yeah, for sure. So many influences, right? Culture and your own family, your life experience, all these things can add up.
So I was wondering if you'd share a little bit more about when this happened, what was
Yeah,
going on in your life when it happened.
almost exactly 2 years ago. So April 2022. I'll talk about the period before that in a few minutes, but we'll kind of use that April 2022. I can remember it pretty specifically. I was coaching a kid soccer game. I coached youth soccer. I was under 16. I had to urinate like multiple times during the game, which is not great as a coach. Luckily, I think there was woods behind the field, so I could run off. And I finish the game and go home, and I'm urinating over and over and over with some discomfort with it, and up all night. As soon as I would go, I would have to go again. As soon as I would go, I'd have to go again all night. So I go to the walk-in clinic the next morning thinking I must have some urinary tract infection. It didn't hurt enough to be a kidney stone. I don't know what the hell was going on. So they run a test, look for an infection, bacteria, and it comes back negative. But I'm in a walk-in clinic, so they're really just doing, getting you in and out quick. And she says, "Well, you tested negative, but we're gonna give you an antibiotic anyways because it's precautionary. Go see a urologist." And I felt better like in a day or two, and kind of resumed activities, kept mountain biking and all of that. And then about 2 weeks later, the same thing happened. I had made an appointment for a urologist in the meantime, but it was, a few weeks out. Typical. I called one office. They said, "Oh yeah, come in a month." And so when it happened the second time, I did the same thing. I went to the walk-in clinic and I told them I had been here before, and she said, "Well, we can change your antibiotic, but you really need to go see the urologist because it's, you're testing negative." And I called my general practitioner and he helped me move up the urologist. I went to see the urologist. Nice woman, did the rectal exam to see if it was a prostate issue. And I mean, I really lucked out in the practitioners that I interacted with. When I hear other people's story that put them down the wrong path, I'm incredibly fortunate that I got steered in the right direction, even if it did take a while for me to really come around to all of it. But anyways, this urologist says, "Stop taking the antibiotics. You don't have an infection. That's not the deal. This happens to men. Sometimes it's called chronic non-bacterial prostatitis. Sometimes it's called chronic pelvic pain syndrome." She said, "It happens to men. They get you from stress." She says, "Your pelvic floor muscles tighten up and you're basically bracing yourself. And, she says, you need to manage your stress." And she says, "That's a good idea for you to stay off your bike and get pressure off of that area for a while." And so, I mean, between I had these three flare ups, there was a third in there. It doesn't really all matter the details, but they kind of all, stacked up, but I was getting that information that it was stress related. And the urologist said a pelvic PT is very helpful. And like, I want to get fixed. I don't want to stay off my bike. So I want to tackle this. So I book a pelvic PT. I also book this pelvic MD specialist. And coincidentally, I had a week off from work, probably the reason leading up to it, I had not taken much time off the year before. I had kind of been running full speed. And so I had a planned week off that really had no reason for it. It was just good timing. I was actually waiting for a client to retire. That was really why I took the week off and waited. Anyways, I take that week off, I mellow out, I do some hiking with my son. I had found some pelvic stretches, pelvic muscle stretching tips online. There's a website called curecpps.com. So I started doing a stretching routine, all that. I returned to work on the Monday after the week off. I go to join like the first meeting on something that had kind of gone crappy while I was out. And the pain hits me like you would not believe. And that's like 9 a.m. on the Monday after I took a week off. And I'm like having to hold myself up and brace myself just to get through a call and like going into sweats. The pain is all deep in my pelvic area, wicked. And that week I worked half days. Each day I'd wake up being like, I hope I can work. There was a few nights where I didn't sleep at all. And it was just bonkers. And it was unreal. Like there was one night it put me in so much pain. I went into like a shivering attack. And I'm like someone that normally just sleeps in a pair of boxers, and I'm like in multiple layers of hoodies and sweatpants and wool socks, bundled up, shivering in pain. It just went nuts. And so that week, I worked half days on and off that whole week, went back to the pelvic PT, and she's like, yeah, your pelvic floor muscles have all tightened and locked up, and went to that pelvic specialist and started these injections into the pelvic floor in the worst place to put a needle. So I'll pause there for a second. Does that? I mean, because I could keep going and I will, but that was like the initial massive flare up.
Would you mind sharing exactly where your pain was?
That deep pelvic pain is really hard to like put your finger on. It's not at the surface. It's almost like if you were at the below your waistband, but or your penis, like there, but like deep below it or
Mm,
deep inside.
yeah.
Just tight and it would just like it would send an alarm up to the brain. Like you just felt adrenaline's not the right word, but it probably is adrenaline, where you can't think about anything. Like it would just block off.
Sometimes I know it's hard to describe it, where it's actually coming from, what
Yeah.
it's doing, because I know I had that same situation. It was hard to figure out exactly what was happening to even tell the provider. But I do want to go back for a second and say that it was so great that you had a doctor from the beginning telling you that this was stress related.
Yeah, the urologist. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What was your response to that when you were told it's stress related?
Well, you know yourself and you know that you run high stress, but you think that there are drawbacks to it, but you don't know what the true physical ramifications are until it hits you. And it's still in the beginning, I wouldn't have said I recognize that like stress did this. You know what I mean? Like you know that stress can make you not sleep well, it can make you irritable. You know all those things because and people even accept like, oh yeah, I get headaches because I get stressed. But you don't know how it manifests physically until you're there. So it didn't hit me right away. If I knew what to do at that point, I would have saved myself the next few months. And even then, like someone saying to you, you got to lower your stress. Like we're not taught how to do that. Or we just hear some words around it that we don't really know exactly how to apply it.
So I'm curious, what did stress mean to you then? Like, what did you think stress was? And did you feel like you were stressed? And then how has that definition changed today?
I mean, I mean, definitely with the changes, I see work stress differently than I did then. At that point, even though I had a secure job and I was doing well, I would still get convinced myself that, things were going terribly or that, one and I had been with the same firm for 28 years. I mean, those were all confidence that I should be fine, right? But you could convince yourself that one screw up and you're going to lose your job or whatever. I think some of that you get into this all or nothing mindset. And then like some stuff that you just can't control. Like I had a whole bunch of home repair issues that went crappy. Like, we had water coming through our house and we had to have our foundation reinforced. That drove me, that added stress. And I think now if I deal with those things, I see it differently. It's like, yeah, it's got to get fixed and yeah, it's money, but there's certainly worse things. And I also just think that it's layers and you can tell yourself that each one is no big deal, but when they're on top of each other and it really compounds. And then, my answer to stress for all my adult life has just been exercise. And sometimes it's exactly what we need, but other times we're just putting another log on the fire, honestly. And it might feel good while we do it, but if you're exhausted and you're in that, fight or flight, and then you go out and you put yourself in more fight or flight, so I look at exercise a bit differently now too. I mean, I look at exercise as fun, time in my own head or time with friends rather than the remedy to stress.
Thank you for bringing that up because I hear that so often. And yeah, it is. It can be a remedy for stress because it allows us to be resilient. But what people fail to realize is that exercise is stressful for the body. It's, if for lack of better terms, positive stress versus negative stress, where people would think, oh, it's out of your control, whereas exercise is you choose to exercise. So, positive stress, but it does get your heart racing. It
Yep.
does put blood in the areas that are responsible for fight or flight, right? As far as your nervous system is concerned, that tiger is still running after you because you are running. You're running. You're actually running. Your heart is beating fast. You're sweating. Like all the same things happen, the adrenaline, all of that good stuff. People fail to realize that that only allows us to be resilient to stress when it does happen. But yeah, good point. You wouldn't do that or you wouldn't want to do that after you've already had a long, exhausted day. Your body is just done. Your nervous system is shot. And then you go exercise on top of that. That's not the kind of resilience we want to build. That doesn't even build resilience. That just adds to the stress.
And especially if you're looking at it in the wrong perspective. Like if you go out for a run or a mountain bike ride, like I like to do, and you're beating yourself up that you don't ride enough. I can only ride for an hour today. I wanted to race in 2 weeks, but what's the point? It's like you really created first world problems, right? I mean, there's people all around the world that would love to have a few minutes to exercise and the means to do it. And here we are beating ourselves up that we're not doing enough of it.
Hmm.
So I guess to pick up my story at that point, I had to take time off from work. I couldn't work. I mean, this is coming from somebody, I went years at times without taking a sick day. And here I was going on short-term disability and took 6 weeks off, which, it was crazy. So those next few weeks, I like put it all on. I was doing PT once or twice a week. I was doing the stretching routine at home. I was getting these injections. I was on amitriptyline and all, there was a whole pile of symptoms that went with it. So I think it'd be good, for anybody that happens onto this to kind of hear that, like, because a lot of times when I had to interact with people since putting my story out there the last 2 months, they want to hear that they had the same symptoms that I had. And when they go through it and they don't line up perfectly, they think, oh, well, I have this. It's not the same. So I had the frequent and intense urination. I had pain with urination. I had sexual dysfunction. I mean, sex was off the table at this point, but leading into this, I had pain with ejaculation. I had constipation. When I was able to go, there was a while where it was coming out like, the diameter of a pencil, deep pelvic pain, muscle tightness, all my inner thighs around my hips. Check, 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 right? Like the whole list. Once those pelvic floor muscles tighten up, all kinds of crazy things happen. Nerves are compressed and all that. So by the end of those 6 weeks off, I was in a better spot. I came back to work. The next few months were all right. I had returned to trail running and some gym work. Didn't get back on my bike. So that the whole thing started in April. So this was by like October. I was starting to be like, all right, I think out of the woods. I had brought in a little bit more of the mental health and the de-stress. I had read Headache in the Pelvis, talked a lot about meditation. almost extreme meditation, recommending 2 to 4 hours a day. Like, oh yeah, piece of cake, right? So there was some pieces that I had brought in. The pelvic practice that I had the injections with. They had a unlearn your pelvic pain course that was kind of interesting that I logged into for 6 weeks. So some of that was some pain education. And I got back on my bike. I did a few rides and things were all right. But then in the November timeframe, my father, who lives in Arizona, I'm here in Georgia, he, be, his health went downhill quickly, and there was some other stuff. I had best friend back in Australia and his wife both were diagnosed with cancer, and we had something in the neighborhood, and then I had a friend from high school pass away quickly from cancer, and it was just a lot, and the symptoms started to come back up, and I was trying to sort out being able to go see my dad out in Arizona. I couldn't travel. I couldn't get out there, and he passed away. My wife flew out there and helped him with the last few days of his life. And so that was in the beginning of December. The pain and the symptoms were wicked. And now I had sit bone pain, which I hadn't dealt with before. I couldn't sit without a pad or a heating pad. Sometimes I'd use ice. My left sit bone was like a hair trigger, and it would get, if it got irritated, which would happen very quickly, it would kind of send a alarm system through my whole body. Like it would make you startle almost. And so, yeah, December was tough. I took the rest of that month off. It was around the holidays, so it wasn't as tough to take the time off, but I just kind of, told my coworkers. So before that first flare up in 2 years ago in April 2022, the few years before that, I had dealt with some oddball health symptoms, like stiff and popping joints, muscle soreness, some of that same frequent and intense urination that would last a day or two every few months. I went down the road of the naturopathic doctor routine and food sensitivities and mold and food elimination and histamine reactions, but never really got to the bottom of it. Got better at times, got worse, up and down. Now I see it all differently than I did then, as all being stress related.
I'm just going to stop you for 1 minute
Yeah,
when,
go for it.
and I'm so sorry about the loss of your dad. And it seems like you've had so many things. That's a lot of stress for any human being to take. When all those things happened and you started getting the sitting pain, did you realize and put it together that stress was causing that, or did you think your symptoms were just getting worse through a physical means?
Well, I had ridden my bike a few times in October, so there was a little bit of a worry that I had like irritated it. Even though during the rides I was fine and after the rides I was okay. I really started to know that it was stress related. Even though I went back to the PT and I got a few more injections, the injections did nothing, so I stopped. And the PT, she was like, your pelvic floor is fine. Like, when she, did the checks, right? And so it was like that January, I really started to dwell on the like, if my brain got me into this, my brain can get me out. That's kind of the logic I had. And I started to bump into more and more of the mind body references. And so I ended up working. I ended up like, because I was following pelvic PTs on social media, to see stretches and recommendations, and also because I started to really worry about this pudendal neuralgia. That, I mean, just such an awful diagnosis. I mean, people go to incredible dark places, and some, take their own life because of it. It's just unreal, the stories around it. But now I was worried about it because it was referenced as the cyclist syndrome. And, now I had this sit bone pain. I happened onto a website called pnandcycling.com and connected with a few other riders that had recovered, but they were tough stories. But all this, I was like circling around the whole stress piece. And one of the she's an OT on Instagram, she had posted up there that if you're doing stretching and you're relying on it to keep your symptoms away, then you haven't gone deep enough to the root cause. And, my head exploded, right? Like, what does that mean? Right. Like, still, I was very much still like, that's the physical way out. And, PT and all that. And so I started to interact with her. I ended up working with her that February, March, and April. She was amazing, just opened me up to all of it and taught me how to use the nervous system regulation tools to get out of the pain I was in. I really wasn't ready for like the next steps. And having that in common where she was a pelvic OT and when I connected with her, I was like, how could you possibly work with people remote? And she's like, I actually have better success with people remote because when they come to see me in person, they come to me with, fix me, right?
Yeah,
And
there's this expectation of like, do to me, touch me, do the manual therapy, show me the exercises and stretches. Yeah.
right. And as much as I appreciated my pelvic PT and she was great and she was very much around the one that I went to hands on. And she was very much that this is stress related. It's still like, I would joke to her, I'm like, oh, I hope you find the reset button this time, like you very much are thinking like this is the fix because that's what we do in Western medicine, right? We want the drug or the procedure, and I'm sure Dr. Keneal, that like you get people that probably come to you and they think they're going to have two visits and they're going to be done, right? Like they're gonna push that one release button on the muscle and it'll all be cured.
Yeah. If only they knew that I barely touch them.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so I started working with her, and she was awesome. She taught me the breath work really to slow down the heart rate and get in control of it. She taught me about the emotional connection to the stress and the pain. And she brought in a lot of concepts and got me going. I started to read books. I read The Way Out by Alan Gordon. I read The Mind Body Prescription, Dr. Sarno, and, I started to get into listening to some podcasts. And she was an advocate of the journal speak approach. So there was a lot of things that she kind of put in front of me and also taught me somatic tracking. So as I got my symptoms lower, how to kind of pay attention to them and not greet them with fear, but greet them more with like, hey, what's this? This is weird. I shouldn't have this. What is it telling me? Rather
Mhm.
than the panic button. So I give a ton of credit. Her name's Lindsay. She does a practice well-being by Lindsay. Well-being with Lindsay. She's amazing. I still keep in touch with her. I mean, I credit her for so much of helping me wake up to what was going on. And I needed that. I think I needed at that time to be connected to somebody with the pelvic piece. Like if I had just gone to anybody that was in mind body, I would have been like, no, no, you don't understand pelvic pain. Um, so, so yeah, so I'll pause there. I mean, that took me to about a year ago now, when I had conquered the chronic part of the pain, the debilitating pain.
Hmm. What I find interesting is that from the very beginning, you got lucky and you were told by your urologist that this is stress related. It didn't take you 10 years or 5 years or 6 years, right? Like it didn't take you years of bouncing around from doctor to doctor to doctor saying, here, try this antibiotic. Here, let's do the injection. Here, let's go to PT. Oh, maybe it was the PT. Try this other PT. Like you didn't bounce around from people to people and you didn't do all those invasive tests. You didn't do surgeries to fix things that they happened to find on any images or studies or from results of tests. You didn't have all that from the very beginning. You were told this was stress related, and still it took you a while. I'm not saying that to like
Mhm. Totally.
judge you. I'm
Cool.
just saying that your nervous system wasn't even ready to accept the fact that it was stress related and you had to be sort of guided and shown. So I say all that to say that people might still know what to do, or they might still know the answers, but they're just not quite ready yet, right? They may be doing the thing like you did, doing all the stretches, but the stretches ain't helping. I think I just posted about this recently that the things that we do as physical therapists for someone who has like chronic issues, it might help, you'll feel better, but it's temporary because it doesn't get to the root cause. It doesn't get to the real reason for the thing. And in your case, well, your nervous system was it was in fight or flight. It was chronically stuck in fight or flight.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing it is really hard to accept in the beginning that this pain that is physical. It is physical. That's the thing is like we can bounce around and try to, clean up the words and we say, oh, it's all in your head or it's not all in your head. Well, it actually is from your brain. I mean, we could talk that in circles, but it is physical. I mean, I had physical symptoms. I mean, like so trying to accept that this is coming from stress. And it shouldn't be that hard. Like people accept that the headache is from stress. And in fact, I was talking about this recently with a friend and they were like, oh, I have a really brutal headache. I'm like, well, what do you think it's from? And they're like, well, it's from tension in my neck. And I said, well, what do you think that's from? And they go, well, when I get stressed, my neck gets tight and then it pulls on my head until I get a headache. I'm like, why does your neck get tight when you're stressed? And I was just trying to I'm not trying to be a jerk and I also don't want to vomit, mind body crap all over people every time I talk to them. But some things people can really accept, stomach ache before a big presentation that you have to give at work. Would you get a stomach ache, right? What is causing that? And back pain, neck pain, pelvic pain, it's all coming from the same source. It's just really hard to relate to that when you're in pain.
And Keneal brings up a good point. You have to be ready to hear it
Yeah.
because I wasn't as lucky as you. I'm not saying you were lucky to have these symptoms,
I was lucky for the
but
practitioners that I dealt with.
mm, you were lucky to have the practitioners because I was told I was crazy and I went down a medical rabbit hole of multiple injections, procedures, and surgeries, which didn't get me anywhere until I found the mind body root. But once I even was told that this was TMS or it was mind body, it was still a hard thing for me to grasp and accept until I went to a doctor because having that DR in front of their name actually for me gave it more credibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also like if when you start to put limitations on what you can do physically in the short term, it starts to really make you feel like it's a physical issue. So for me, being a, cyclist for so long, mountain biking, road biking, training, all that, when I was getting told like, well, yeah, you're gonna need to stay off your bike, and then running into things, oh, you'll never ride again, right? You've got pudendal neuralgia, you'll never ride again. That immediately says, well, that means there's something physical that is going to limit me. But also, that was some of those things were actually helpful because I was like, wait a second, I've been in the bicycling world for all these years. This is not common topic. There are people that train a lot more than I do. And in fact, when this started, I was riding less than I had in years. When we had lived in Australia for 4 years, and I was riding a shit ton then. I mean, I was always on my bike. I never had this issue then. I was also lower stress. and and then, here I am in Georgia coming out of the winter when I really wasn't riding a lot, and then this hits me. It's like I couldn't really make the connection. And if this was something that was so associated, if it was so driven by cycling, wouldn't it be a epidemic in parts of Europe and in China where, everyone rides? No, we've got a first world nation stress driven problem actually, right? So one of those things were kind of like all that really kind of helped me get around this is stress driven. So when I finished with Lindsay, I was in a pretty good spot. I wasn't back on my bike. I was still facing a big career decision. And I still had little spikes of flare-ups, and I lived in a bit of fear of them. Like sometimes it'd be a physical trigger, like I'd slide across the car seat getting in, I get a little wince, or I'd have a week where there was a lot going on, I'd have a little bit of pain, and I decided to, work with another coach. So I worked with Jeannie Colwin. She knew that I knew all the TMS stuff, that I had been like saturated in the podcast and I had read the books. So she quickly was like, all right, we're going to take you about 3 levels above where you're looking at things now. And she just got me to think about a bunch of different things differently about where purpose and goals, where these things and where your values come down into your day to day and how that can be an underlying part of disconnecting, not being happy with where you were at. And she helped me with the career change, the job change, and helped coach me back on my bicycle and help me with my response to the small flare ups that I was having. And I worked with her through past December.
So it sounds like with this last or this most recent coaching, you were working more with your beliefs and value system.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I have a lot of work to do on that still. I think Jeannie planted a whole bunch of seeds. Um, and I'm still working on those. You still got to live your life. I still got to, I can't make maybe some of the radical changes. And I don't know, I'm 50 years old and I still don't know what I want to do with my life. I like what I do in parts of my job, but there's other parts of it that don't give me a whole lot of meaning.
When we can find meaning in our life and purpose, how our symptoms can just change, diminish, and even vanish.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so much about what you are spending your time thinking about, whether you mean to or not, you know? And so, and I really do think that a lot of this is about distracting yourself, and pain is created to distract you from things that you don't want to think about. And that's a lot of what, Sarno and others explained, is that like it's easier to have pain than it is to think about uncomfortable emotions. And so whatever that distraction might be, now for people that deal with mind body pain, that's these symptoms. For other people, it's unfortunately alcohol, or drugs or other addictions that might be their way of distracting their brain from what they don't want to think about. So I don't know, I could probably ramble there, but you
I
know,
mean, I would even take that a little bit further because this is where my thinking always goes is that distraction was learned and taught. This was, these were things that we picked up from early ages because we saw examples of that, or we weren't given the opportunity to be in our feelings. We weren't given the opportunity to do all the things that we need, like think about purpose, right? Like it's all very superficial. That's just the kind of society that we live in. And as you were speaking, I was thinking these things didn't happen to our ancestors back in the day, right? Because there wasn't capitalism and consumerisms and all these isms, right? It was just survival. That was really the key. That
yeah,
was really the only thing we had to think about was survival. Are we gonna get food? Where are we gonna get food from? Are we safe? Do we have shelter? It was the basic things. And in today's society, it's the basic things plus more. Like there's just so much more. And we're conditioned to think that all of these things are more important than the basic things like community and safety and whatnot. So we push all of those things to the side. So it's learned distraction. We learned to not think about those things because of the position that we were put in and we're born into it. So it's not like our parents even like consciously taught us these things. We're born into the society. And as little people, we're absorbing and observing our world and going, okay, if this, then that. And these are the beliefs. The if this, then that. Those are the beliefs that we say, oh, I see this. So that must mean XYZ, whatever. And we attach these things and they become our beliefs and our values. And that's why it was like, oh, you're working on your beliefs and your values because that's really all it comes down to is working on, I call it the mindset. There's so many thoughts and beliefs and things that we have accumulated that we never question. We don't question it. We just take it as fact. And only when it's turned around and we can look at it and question it, then it's like, oh, maybe that is not a belief I want to keep going with. And I fear that people don't do that often because of fear, because it makes you question everything else in life. If I thought this, but it's not true. What else is not true about my life and about society and about things around me? It's a very big thought and a very big conversation. But
It's so true because I know that I was taught to shove down my emotions because I was told, oh, Laura, you're too sensitive. So what I did was I distracted myself and I went running. So anytime I was angry, sad, grieving, whatever emotion was coming up for me, I went and took a run. But what I realized is as much as exercise is important, I couldn't run away from my problems and I couldn't run my problems away.
Yeah, I think we're rewarded and acknowledged for being very busy.
Mm.
That was one thing I took away from the years living in Australia was, when somebody in the US, it's very common for someone to say, like if I say to you, "Hey, Keneal, how are you?" You might say, "Oh, I'm busy." If you said that, my experience was if I said that in Australia, they'd be like, "Mate, that's not an emotion. That's just
So
like a."
true.
And so you're answering, "How are you?" with busy, and it's almost like a little bit of a boast, like, right? Or a little bit of a like, "Oh, I'm awesome, I'm busy, but also feel bad for me." So I try never to answer that question with busy. But I do think, like, would I answer that question as busy? And what good is that? Like, do I really need to be that busy? And I certainly, my wife notices all the time. She's like, you feel guilty when you have a few hours to yourself and you feel like you have to stuff something there when, maybe it's time to sit back and read or just, hang out with the dog or whatever. But I tend to stuff in anything I can all the time. So,
Mm.
So, with all this knowledge that you have
mm.
about TMS and not stuffing down emotions and changing your job and your belief system, how have you approached life now?
Well, I mean, let me just say that there's been improvements. I do have setbacks. I mean, in mindset, I don't have, the pelvic pain. So that's great. I'm riding my bicycle a ton. I'm riding with friends and having fun. That seemed like was not going to happen. All the other things that were limitations have gone away there. But I still have issues where I go back to old mindset of being busy and ruminating and dwelling on things, going into a very negative headspace at times. But I'm more aware of it now. I know the tools that help, whether I stick to them or not is different. I started yoga almost a year ago now, and the yoga story is kind of funny. My wife gave me my first yoga class on my 50th birthday. She took a few days off. I'd had the week off for my 50th birthday again a year ago. And that morning she's like, "Oh, congrats. We're going to go to yoga for your first time." And I probably, shot arrows out of my eyes at her like, "I don't want to go to yoga, like I want to run. I want to ride my bike, I want to weight lift. I don't want to do yoga." And now I'm hooked. I go like 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes even more. So I know that that is part of what works for me. I know meditation works well for me when I do it. I definitely took a break from it when I was feeling really good. And that's kind of what we do, right? We get to a better spot and we think, oh, it's kind of like that Western medicine model. Oh, I took my prescription. I'm done. I finished PT. I'm done. I
Yeah.
had my procedure. I'm done. But like these are lifestyle changes, not like meditation or whatever it is helps you. You stick with it. But I've fallen into that trap where when I feel better, those things kind of fall away. I'm not going to use that half hour to meditate. I'm going to go get busy and do something else.
And that's just human nature. We all do that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't believe anybody that says that they've perfected it.
I'd also like to point out that meditation, the more you do it, the less you actually need to do it
Right.
because everything then becomes a meditation. Everything
Yeah.
becomes a meditation. So you don't need to formally do the sit in a quiet room with your eyes closed. That doesn't need to happen as often when you learn to view every experience as a meditative experience.
One of my biggest ways I meditate, especially this time of year, is picking weeds.
Yeah.
It keeps me so focused. You can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can touch it. So it's there's so many different ways to meditate, and it's true, Camille, you do that throughout your whole entire day once you've meditated for so many months and years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, the phrase mindfulness, I mean, mindfulness was an absolutely normal thing that everybody did all the time before technology. And I really do, my I have two teenage boys that, they're on their phone a lot, right? Um, And there was a stand-up comic that said, back in, I grew up in the 80s. We were mindful all the time. We waited at the bus stop. We threw a rock at the stop sign. That's all we could do. Mom was supposed to pick us up from soccer practice. She's not there. Did she forget about us? We didn't know. We just sat there. And
Right.
like, so now what do we do? We fill that time with staring at a screen. But like, yeah, like you're saying, Laura, like doing simple things and just trying to, just enjoy it, like chop vegetables and don't stream something on Netflix while you do it, right? Or just do that, just chop vegetables or just walk the dog leave your phone at the house. I mean, some of these things they're habits that we have to create because we've formed in practices that aren't healthy, really.
Mm. Yeah. Again, I feel like it was done to us. It was done on purpose. Anyone that's worked with, technology companies, the point is, how can we get people to use our technology more and more? And they use human psychology to tap into our subconscious to get us to fall prey to these things. And we have to be so conscious of it when we are mindful to be like, oh, whoa, I was just on my phone scrolling on Instagram for an hour. What the heck? I just came to check a message or do
Yep.
something, whatever it was. You get so distracted and so caught up in the thing, and you have to be really mindful of it
Yeah.
to do like you suggested. Go for a walk without the earbuds, without the phone, cook and chop things without turning on the TV or listening to a podcast, which I am so guilty of doing. I distract myself, but it's just about being aware of it. There are certain times where I'm like, I'm gonna go sit out on my porch and be like the old lady that I want to be and just sit and watch the cars go by. That's all. I don't want my phone. I don't want to do anything. I want to be like my dog sitting next to me. I always joke that my animals are meditating. Anytime we let the animals out, we have cats and dogs and they just sit there. I'm like, they're meditating. I'm gonna go meditate with them.
Yeah, I have posted about we can learn so much about our nervous system regulation from our dogs.
Mm.
They have all these habits, not habits. I mean, it's nature, right? If your
Instinct.
dog,
Yeah.
yeah, if your dog wants alone time, it goes find a quiet spot, right? Like if it wants attention, comes over. I have two dogs. My bigger dog will come over and poke me with his nose and look at me like, just pet me, like that's all I need right now. Like, so we can learn a lot from watching them.
Totally agreed.
So I'm just curious, what's the biggest or the most important lesson you've learned from your journey?
I think if I was to give, I was to be able to give myself advice from when I was in the worst of it in the beginning would be really to stay calm and, not panic. Um, and that things will take time and not look, there aren't going to be that easy answer. It's not going to be that you need, this procedure or whatever. You're not going to bump into it on some stupid forum online. So I don't really know if that answers your question, but if I was, when people come to me, because I've had a lot of people reach out to me that have run into Eddie's podcast or a few places that I've posted, and I do have my bio on that pnandcycling.com site. Kate that runs that site is awesome, and she's using some of the information I give her for it. So I've had a number of people reach out to me, and those are some of the things I tell them is like, get off the doomsday symptom forums. Stop focusing on getting this specific prognosis. Is it this? Is it chronic prostatitis or is it pudendal neuralgia? I mean, in the end, it's not going to matter that much, you know. And then I also tell people like the physical relief is helpful. Just so you know, as Dr. Keneal said, it's temporary. It's going to help lower your nervous system. And I love what Charlie Merrill says, like about it giving you safety in your body and making you feel like it's a safe place. That dude's awesome. I got a man crush on Charlie Merrill. Hopefully I get to ride with him someday, though I'm sure he'll whip my ass. Um, but yeah, I think some of that, like just really getting safety and just knowing that it's going to be all right.
That's
Thank you.
fantastic advice
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah,
to
why don't you share
share.
where people can find you
Oh,
too?
Yeah. So, like I said in the beginning, I have a full-time job as an engineer, but I do want to keep getting my story out there. I had a bit of a sprint with it for 2 months. And really the only place I'm using is an Instagram site, Andrew MB Cyclist. And the MB could stand for mountain bike, but it could also stand for mind body. uh, so that's where they can find. Um, and I'm keeping it simple, but it has been a way for people to connect and ask me questions. And then I've been I'm helping out with the pnincycling.com because, pudendal neuralgia has this connection to the cyclist world, and we're trying to help get people to understand where more about it. And this woman, Kate, she runs that. And so I have my story there too. But yeah, if people want to connect to me through that, Andrew MV Cyclist at Instagram would be a way to send me a note or whatever, or read more about my story or see pictures of my dog or my bicycles.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. I know you're going to help a lot of listeners.
Yeah, I hope I can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you'd like to leave us a message or ask a question, please check the show notes with the link so you can reach us directly, or email us at beyondthepelvis@gmail.com.